Alright, Ancestral Warchief Totem Chieftain build overview. Let's get this started. So it is a build overview here. I'm going to be basically covering the setup that I've chosen for my character, the strengths of the build and why I chose the things I did, and also some alternatives, mostly on the gear side of things for like cheaper budget stuff and all that. But first off, it is a Brutus lead sprinkler build. Can't see it because of the ping. But so it's a strength stacking character. You can see I've got 1300 strength. That's kind of the core concept of the build, and everything else is planned around it. And if you want to just kind of see the details for yourself and check everything out, I'm gonna have a link to a Path of Building paste bin, as well as a direct link to this character on my character profile in the video description. And the only thing to note there would be in the character profile, this jewel socket may be empty. It's using a Might of the Meek there, but I've been swapping it between a couple characters. So if that is empty, just know that that is a Might of the Meek that's supposed to be there. And let's get things going. So the strengths of the build. I made it to do some Shaper farming and do some Elder and Uber Elder farming in hardcore. So what better way to show it off than to do a Shaper run? And so one thing you'll notice really quickly, well, one, that this guy packs quite a punch on DPS for a build that has almost 10,000 life. But also, I actually have 5 totems, and I'm using 2 types of totems. And that is because I have Ancestral Protector linked to the new multiple totem support gem, which I'll go into more detail on that when I go through all the gear and stuff. But basically, it's letting me use 3 Warchief totems, as well as 2 Protector totems for mostly just a giant boost to the overall DPS of the setup. Yeah, you'll see. Character is very tanky, pretty solid DPS. But that being said, the clear speed, not great, to put it lightly. Not really a great mapping character unless you just enjoy mapping with Warchief totems. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I do really like the style when it comes to getting some easy boss kills. Look at this one last guardian here, and we'll start up the big dude. Guess I can cover a couple other things while we get some downtime between these fights. You'll see I have also a Vol Ancestral Warchief, which originally I thought was going to be a nice addition for map clear speed and maybe kind of make up some of that lack that the totems generally have in clearing. But unfortunately, the way the totem works, it does leap around and it does use a Sunder type attack, which sounds great when you just read it. It sounds like it'll be awesome for clearing. Unfortunately, it behaves the same as regular Warchief totems, where it'll deactivate if you get too far away from it. Which means if the packs aren't right next to each other, it can just get deactivated because you have to move too far between packs, and it doesn't actually help all that much with clearing. But that being said, it does give a nice boost to single target DPS because it has a 32, I believe, % more damage buff for just having one active that does stack with the regular Warchief totem buff and kind of let you just build all that extra DPS up. So it is good for burst DPS, which is why you'll see me drop it on each of these Shaper phases here. And then I also mentioned Elder and Uber Elder.
Let me help you.
As of recording this, I've actually been able to down Uber Elder 10 times in Hardcore League, which is pretty strong, I would say, especially for a totem build like this. It's not too hard to put together, I would say, compared to other hardcore Uber Elder farmers. Even price-wise, it's pretty moderate. But again, you have to kind of deal with some of the clunkiness and annoyance of leveling a totem character, which actually ends up being fine if you are playing in the Betrayal League and have access to something like pure Breachstone rotations, which are a really good way to get XP. I think that covers pretty much all the basics, so I'm gonna just speed through to the end of this Shaper fight here, and then we will start going over all the actual details of the gear and the tree and all that stuff. And I just noticed in my rush to get this recorded, this kill, I actually forgot to even put in my single target DPS setup. So I was actually doing that whole fight with my lower DPS setup, but hard to notice because things die so fast.
To save the future, the past must be sacrificed.
Alright, and there you go. So, let's get into the nitty-gritty details of the build. First off, starting with the gear. Unique items. Like I mentioned, the one mandatory item of the build is the Brutus Lead Sprinkler. It's a huge portion of the damage because it's giving tons of flat fire damage per strength, which is all of our damage scaling is basically off of that flat fire. And yeah, it's the only mandatory item. Everything else is good, but not necessarily required to make it function. And then we'll cover the rest of the uniques, starting from the more important things and easier to get kind of as well. The boots, Alberon's Warpath, very strong, 18% strength. Again, we're stacking strength, so 18% is quite good. These are currently giving me about 160 almost strength, where by comparison, a ring with 48 strength is giving me less than 100. So it's a huge boost of strength. They're really cheap, really easy to get. Ideally, you want to enchant them. I went for the Ellie Pen enchant. It's really powerful, but it's kind of annoying to farm. Otherwise, if you want an easier one, you could go for something like life regen when you get hit, or I think cold damage if you've been hit, or even lightning damage. You'll get half of those converted to fire. You'll lose a little bit. You'll see why in a second, but other than that, the Lore Weave, very strong, 80 max res, brings a lot of the defense, gives a little bit of attributes, some LE damage, but I would probably chase this as the first kind of expensive item in the build, since they are a bit pricey, at least in hardcore at the moment, but definitely the first thing you want to go for there. Just a really good overall item. And then the other two uniques, which are kind of the big purchase later choice items, would be the Amulet, Zoph's Blood, and the two-socket Tomb Fist Gloves. Now, both of these you can replace basically with just rares. I think in both slots you'd probably just go for, say, a rare Amber Amulet with life and strength and maybe some resistances or stats that you're missing. And then same for the gloves, life and strength, maybe attack speed, something like that. But, you know, just pretty simple to get rares if you can't afford these yet. It's pretty budget friendly for most of this stuff to get started, and then it just gets expensive as you start maxing it out. You'll see pretty quickly. But then that covers all the uniques. Next up would be the shield, which I'm using a rare shield, which was kind of hard to make. I was trying to get one with tier 1 life and tier 1 strength. I ended up with, I think, tier 2 or tier 3 life even. I forget what the ones on shields go up to, and then tier 2 strength. But the big thing is the crafted +1 max number of summoned totems. That craft costs 2 exalts, And then I also ended up multi-modding mine to get another life roll, which is another 2 exalts. So it gets pretty pricey if you want to go for a craft like that. Or if you could just luck out and find a shield with high strength and high life that has an open prefix. Otherwise, budget alternative for this one is actually the unique shield, the Tukohama's Fortress, which I don't know what they're at currently, but they're a lot cheaper than the 2x price to craft +1 totems. And it gives you a +1 totem. The only downside is it doesn't have like a nice strength roll and maybe some res that you could really make use of. Following that, the rings are where we're getting a lot of our stats from and other resistances. You'll see they both have a life roll and a big strength roll, which is important, but then it's mostly just resistances. This one has a little bit of dexterity and then lightning res. This one's just got some res. And then if you have an open prefix, you can craft some damage on them. The helmet, I fossil crafted this one. It's a really solid choice for pristine and scorched fossils. Unfortunately, mine didn't hit a good pristine life roll, which that's what they give. Then the scorched gives the -9 fire res, so you get some DPS out of it as well. Obviously, grab an enchanted helmet if you can find one. The grants 30% damage or the just straight up 40% damage for the totem itself are both fine. I forget what the third enchant is. I think there's like an area of effect one for Warchief. Don't really care about that one. But if you want a budget option here, Dyed Bellow. It's a prophecy upgraded helmet. Is really strong. It gives you a huge DPS boost when you use a war cry, which we've gotten during crying this anyway, so you're spamming that a lot. You lose a little bit of HP, but I think it's about the same or maybe even more DPS than this one is. And then finally, the belt. This is a bit of a tough one to make yourself. I got pretty lucky. It looks crazy because it's got a weapon elemental roll, but realistically you can craft, I think, almost just as much. You can craft more even than what mine has, but the hard part is that percent attributes roll. That is a elder belt roll only, and you need, I believe, item level 80 for that. So kind of tough to roll. If you can't go for that or you want a cheaper one, just get one with life and a big strength roll, and then just resistances or whatever else you might need. And that's it for the gear. Next up, just quickly go through the flasks. I've got a bubbling or seething, whatever. Life flask, bleed removal. A wise oak, which you're going to want to get. Obviously, your fire res is the highest. And then I would say ideally your cold res as the lowest if you can't balance the two, because there's a lot more scary cold damage than lightning. But ideally balance the cold and the lightning. I don't even think it's that important to balance all three. Just kind of gets annoying. And I don't think there's too much fire damage threats. This build has pretty decent LE mitigation with the Lorive anyway. Then a basalt flask, curse removal, silver flask, freeze removal, quicksilver of adrenaline. The staple in pretty much every build. And that's that. I've got some other setups that I switch things out for on Uber Elder, which I'm going to go over probably at the very end of the video. And I'll have like timestamps and whatever to link to that if you want to check that out. But that's all the gear. That's all the flasks. Real quickly, going to just jump through the gems, starting with the main big boy, the Warchief itself. This is the boss killing setup in it at the moment. We've got Ancestral Warchief, elemental damage with attacks, ruthless, damage on full life, which this counts off your life, not the totem's life. And since we have a lot of regen and we have totem leech, we're on full life pretty often. Huge damage multiplier. And then concentrated effect and elemental focus. We lose the ability to ignite, but not a big deal. And then our secondary totem, which is in our helmet, is the Ancestral Protector, which, again, it's linked to multiple totems, which lets you use 3 Warchiefs. You can see if I spam them, I'm stuck at 3. But if I pop these, I go up to also 2 Protectors. It gives 20% more attack speed while the totem's active, so already 20% more DPS to our Warchief. We have combustion linked in here, so these can ignite, and when they do ignite, the enemies lose fire res, which is another boost to the Warchief. And then we have elemental damage with attacks, which just gives the totem itself a little bit of DPS. So they do a little bit, not a ton. But mostly they're just supplementing DPS into the Warchief. Then in here we've got, I believe, the cast and damage taken setup with Immortal Call and Cold Snap. Cold Snap's just a nice defensive skill. It puts a chilled ground, and if you're clearing maps, it can give frenzy charges occasionally. But mostly that chill is really nice. In my shield, I've got my self-casted flammability linked to faster casting and increased duration, just because I have so many spare gem spots that I Didn't know what else to put there. But self-cast because no room for blasphemy. No need to curse on hit for one curse. And the boots, we've got our shield charge and our leap slam, which are linked to faster attacks and fortify. And then in the gloves, we've got enduring cry linked to increased area of effect, or that single target endurance charge, generation, and sustain. And that's the whole inventory side of things. So jump to the tree. First up, the ascendancy. First big 4 points, you want Namahu and Hinakora. This one gives some damage. The Fizz converted to fire and the Fizz gained as fire there are actually not completely terrible. You do have a little bit of physical damage base. I think they end up adding like somewhere between 5 and 10% more DPS, which was surprising to me. But the fire pin's nice, and it's the travel node to get to this, which gives us a big strength boost, and it gives us our leech from the totems leeched to you as life, and it gives us the chance to cover uniques in Ash. So it's a huge DPS boost, it's a big sustain. But also the sneaker stat here, that fire damage leech as life, that doesn't help you, because it's just regular leech in your totem build. But it does mean the totems leech for themselves, and it actually does help to keep them alive in boss fights as well. And then another no-brainer, we've got the first of the totem nodes. Enemies near your totems deal less, take increased. Very self-explanatory. But I skipped out on this second one, which is the other totem node. It doesn't really do a lot. Immune to fire damage doesn't really do much. Armor for your totems doesn't do much. The totems reflecting doesn't really do much. All it really does is totems have chance to taunt, which you can get in a single abyss jewel. One of these has it, I believe. This one right here. So if you just get one abyss jewel with like a high tier chance to taunt on hit, kind of replaces that whole node and lets you instead grab this node, which is an endurance charge based one. You get 0.5 regen per charge and 6% damage per charge, as well as endurance charge generation for mapping. But I've got 4 charges in this build, so basically it's 2% life regen, which is pretty big, and then some damage. Much nicer. And then from that, you'll see the regular rest of the tree pretty much goes for 3 things. Some totem nodes for DPS, a lot of life nodes, and a lot of strength. And right off the bat, you'll see I'm taking this weird path out of here. It's just to get all these nodes that are affected by the Might of the Meek, since they're all buffed up. So these are giving 15 strength. These are giving, 6% life, 7% life even, 1.2% regen. And then we grab the other stuff in the Marauder start. Go down towards Lava Lash for some fire damage, and then into Duelist for, again, strength travel nodes, which actually are helpful, so it doesn't feel bad traveling a lot. More life, more strength. And then the one big thing, blood magic. Might have noticed, no mana. Blood magic. Not actually using it for anything special. Could do it as a non-blood magic build. It'd probably get you more DPS. But giant life nodes. So we want those. Big life nodes behind blood magic. Whole bunch of HP. The damage is good enough anyway. And then from there we go up 2 different ways. First one's over here. By this jewel we get the Scion Wheel. We get Totemic Zeal. And we get a jewel socket with some resistances tagged on, which can actually really help with getting your resistances capped. And then our 1 endurance charge, we picked this one because it's next to the 0.2% regen per charge, so more life regen, jewel socket there. Life nodes, totem nodes, jewel sockets, and then resolute technique, because we don't want to have to worry about accuracy, and it's kind of a pain to proc elemental overload as a totem build. Up to Templar, more life, more strength, more damage. Ancestral Bond, more life, chaos res, more damage, more life. Strength, damage, life, strength, damage. Yes. Good. Yes. That's the tree. Again, links will be in the description if you want to look over the whole thing for like path of building or the profile. For the pantheons, I've been mostly running Soul of Lunaris or Soul of Solaris. Kind of swap between the two. They're both really strong. You really need that avoid projectiles that have chained upgrade on this one if you want to do any sort of chain maps. Otherwise, your totems are just going to PK you. And then minor one, I really like gruthkul. And I'll usually swap to the upgraded Soul of Yugel for something like Uber Elder or anything that deals a lot of cold damage. But mostly these 3. They're really good. It's very strong in general. And as far as the bandits are concerned, which I'll get asked about anyway because I left them for last again. We killed all the bandits. Got the skill points. Don't need any of their bonuses. Just get them extra points. And I believe that's the whole build. Before I go, I'm going to really quickly go over some of this stuff in here. This is my Uber Elder swap tab, which just kind of has some things for that fight specifically. First being Forbidden Taste. I swapped this in for the life flask. It's a full heal flask, which is really important against the really spiky damage of that fight. And then I also drop my Quicksilver and my Silver for these two Silver flasks, which are identical. They have a special suffix of the Order, which is a bench-crafted flask mod. You have to get a special craft from the Katarina Fight Unique Flask. But it gives 3% regen during effect, so it's just a nice little defensive boost. And I run 2 of them because I like having them up. I like having this effect up pretty much all the time. Then I've got Combs Roots to be immune to the Elder Slow. I've got the Ralakesh Impatience, which you just throw on before the fight to pre-stack your endurance charges, so you're at 4 right away. And then I've got Vigilant Strike and Ancestral Call and the Vigil Unique Jewel, which I pop in to my tree up here so I can use Vigilant Strike and get like 35-second fortifies. And I drop out the cast when damage taken set up to fit it in. And that lets us kind of not have to reproc fortify all the time. And yeah, that's it. That's the build. Hopefully I covered it all. If you're looking for a nice tanky, pretty relaxed boss killer build, definitely can recommend it. Or if you're just looking for something a little different, change of pace, totem build, War Chiefs haven't been really played much recently. Give it a swap. You can get it started, like I said, relatively budget friendly. You're not going to be able to do much of the bosses on a super cheap budget, at least not safely. But you can definitely get the build at least functioning. And yeah. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them down in the comments. Otherwise, that's all from me. Thanks everybody for watching. And I'll see you in the next video. Later.